Hey guys, it's Dr. Drake 63 here today. Gonna talk about a new to me Smith & Wesson. Another 357 Smith & Wesson. This one's an oldie but a goodie. It's the end frame, and it's a big honking gun, and it's a 357 Magnum. This particular one, I picked this up on a trade. Traded a Ruger 44 Magnum for this guy right here. The 357 Highway Patrolman. This one is vintage 1980 from Smith & Wesson. Going to just talk about it a little bit. Looking at some specs. The trigger, some things like that. Compare it to what I consider to be a similar gun in the Smith & Wesson 586, which is an L frame, also in a 4-inch barrel. So stay tuned. The model 28-2 is a frame design which basically was born of the original 357 Magnum that Smith & Wesson made, going back to the 1930s. General George Patton carried one. It is a large frame design, and the person who owned this before me decided to dump as much oil inside of the inner workings as they could. I'm not happy about that, but we'll clean it up as we go. But this is a very heavy framed firearm. Okay. If you have small hands, which I don't, if you don't like carrying a gun that has weight to it, which isn't a problem for me, then my suggestion is this isn't the gun for you. But this right here has a matte blued finish, a very nicely done matte blued finish that's lasted very well since 1980. This being 2018, so, 38 years, not bad. I don't believe these are the original wood grips. And I've got a little bit of a fit problem with them, which is why I don't think they are. And you can see right here, when you tighten that screw hand tight, it causes these to split open. So I have some fitting to do with this. Not a big deal, but some things I like about it: there's no lock on it, and it has an integral firing pin, which I like. Just take a listen to this. Also, you can see it stages nicely. So, in a single action scenario, very easy trigger pull. In a double action, a little bit more deliberate. But with a big heavy frame like this, recoil's not going to be a problem. But if we want to compare this to a similar type of firearm, it would be this guy right here, which is the Smith & Wesson 586. Now, this particular one happens to be a newer model, and it's got the beautiful shiny bluing on it. Enough so that you could use that as a mirror and brush your teeth with it if you wanted to. So just comparing these guys side by side, what you're going to notice right off the bat is a couple things. Number one, extremely shiny, refined. I'm not going to say it's as nice as a Colt Python, but very pretty finish that you worry about fingerprints. This is a matte dull blue. This is meant to be a finish that goes in a holster that can take some wear and tear and isn't going to show much wear. And as you can see looking at this, not much wear at all. Tiny bit of wear here on the end of the muzzle. That's about it. It's held up really nicely. I think there may be a spot or two. Here's a spot where there's a little bit of surface rust that we'll get after. But other than that, very nice. One of the other differences you're going to notice is this big full lug that runs the length of the barrel with this L frame, and that the cylinder is smaller than what you see here. Here you have a lug that's just long enough to basically shroud the ejector rod. You can see a much better idea with the 28-2 on the right, just how much wider and overall bigger the diameter of that cylinder is versus on the left, the 586. Another big difference I want to show you is when you're looking at the barrel, and this is kind of cool. The barrel on this 28-2 is actually tapered from where it's pinned into the frame and tapers out. So just a different approach to how they made them then and how they designed them then to how they do them now. Thought that might be of interest. You can see just the thickness of the walls right there of that cylinder. It's a heavier cylinder, it's a thicker affair. Now personally, I like the way that a shiny blued cylinder like this looks, without a doubt. Very, very nice. But it shows fingerprints, it shows wear, and to me this is more of a show pony gun, a little bit more. Now I showed you how it operated, or how the 28-2 operated in terms of the trigger pull. This is very similar. However, this does not have an integral firing pin on it. The hammer comes down, hits this transfer, hits the transfer bar, and that's how she fires. And you also have this lock on here. So when you hear people talk about pre-lock, what they mean is that lock doesn't exist. We can thank our friends back in the Clinton administration for that modification, which was intended as a safety. And here you don't see it at all. So big difference there. Okay. What are some other differences between these two guns before we get into weights and things of that nature? Well, one is you hear people talk about a pinned barrel. What does that mean? What that means is right here, where when that barrel is screwed on, it lines up with a hole across the top of this top rib, and that goes right through. And so that pins the barrel in a specific location, whereas here, this screws on, it screws on tight, but it's not pinned. Is that a real big deal? Some guys think yes. A lot of guys will tell you that this would be a lot easier to hand fit and make perfect in terms of not having any kind of clocking, whereby you might have a little bit of a situation where you go past a couple degrees past or a couple degrees short of being straight up and down. Okay. When you've pinned them, it's harder for something like that to happen. I recently purchased this Model 60, and it's actually about 1.5 to 2 degrees off of top dead center. You can see that with the sight, enough to make it shoot a little bit off. Another big difference you're going to see is what's called a recessed cylinder. You hear pinned and recessed as being what makes the older guns better. What this basically is, you see here, is the rim of the cartridge can slide in and be flush with your cylinder, whereas here it's just a round cut. Pinned and recessed. So better explained, you see how the bottom of this spent cartridge is flush with the cylinder right there because it's recessed. I guess counterbore would be another way to put it. Here looking at it from the side, you can see that it's not, because it's not counterbored. The rim of the round does not go flush, whereas the rim of this round does. Now looking at the weight of this 586, you see that it's 2 pounds, 10.05 ounces. So it's relatively stout. Looking at the weight of this 28-2, we see that it's 2 pounds, 12.9 ounces. So almost 13 ounces versus 2 pounds, 13 ounces versus 2 pounds, 10 ounces. So that's a bit heavier, without a doubt. It's not day heavier, but it is definitely heavier. And you will notice a difference like that in hand, probably to a degree. So taking a closer look, what you're going to notice is that a lot of the weight in the 28-2 is in the frame itself. Because if you look at the barrel, it's a thicker barrel, clearly. When we're looking at the 586, it's got the full lug, and it's got a smaller cylinder. So you also got some weight in the cylinder. I'm going to call the grips a wash. But it'll be real interesting to see when I shoot these side by side if there is any difference in noticeable felt recoil. And I'm certainly going to have to do something on the fit of these grips. That's the kind of thing that will drive me a little bit crazy, but we'll get it worked out. But I have to say that I am a fan of this, what I'll call a service finish versus a show pony finish, and I like them both. So I'm not here to pick one or the other. This one looks better, this one wears better. That's kind of how I'd want to put that. I wouldn't want to be staring down the barrel of either of them, I'll tell you that. I have a feeling I'm going to find that they're both pretty accurate. It's a Smith and 357. What do you expect? I don't seem to tire of these Smith & Wessons and 357. I have a couple 4-inch barrel versions and full size frames, L frame, N frame. Like the M60, which I picked up not too long ago, which is a fine shooting 357. And on top of that, we're shooting that Colt Trooper Mark III, and that's a 6-inch barrel. That's in 357. We've got the Birdies we use for cowboy shooting. Those are in 357. And of course my 1873 Winchester reproduction by Taylor's, that's in 357 Magnum. I think it's a great round. Everything I need to do, I can do with it. Self-defense, target, fun, and as well as it would handle pretty much all the hunting I need to do in North America. So enjoying this stuff. Really like those Smith & Wessons. I know there's going to be some Ruger fans and some Taurus guys that say, dude, you can get just as good a gun, blah, blah, blah. I don't think so. I think Smith & Wesson's got the nicest selection and the longest tradition of fine revolvers out there. Colt's not bad either. I know there's other people making good revolvers. Dan Wesson comes to mind. But all in all, I'd like to tell you that I'm a big fan of the Smith & Wesson 357, and I'm not alone in that area. This is D.R. Drake saying thanks for watching, and we're going to have a shoot-off with these firearms, see what we can do with other 357s coming up.